Have you ever heard the phrase, I just need to wrap my head around this, or I need to figure this out? As I look at my own addictive struggles and work with other guys, I am increasingly becoming convinced that this approach doesn't work when it comes to solving the conundrum around our unwanted sexual behaviors. Today on Finding Traction, we talk about our own best thinking and why I call it a dead end to solving the porn struggle. Welcome aboard.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, first of all, let me say this. I do consider myself a pretty logical guy. I mean, sure, I'm no rocket scientist or Mensa member, but I do think I have a pretty good head on my shoulders. And normally I think my logical, rational side can lead me in a good direction. And I think by and large, good, rational thinking can solve a lot of problems and be of great use to us. Issues like how to deal with the mother-in-law, or where we should take our family vacation this summer, or how to prepare for retirement, things like that, where we take and apply our best thinking, we examine an issue, we create a set of alternatives, we choose the one that has the best number of positives, the least number of negatives. It's pretty straightforward. Logical thinking, logical results. And lots of life, I think, is pretty straightforward if we can apply our best thinking to a problem and then choose the wisest path. As long as, of course, we stick with the wise path that we chose. Having said all of that, I think there are other things that our best thinking doesn't really work for us. Areas that our best thinking doesn't give us the skills or tools we need to resolve the challenge in front of us. Let me give you a few examples. For example, have you ever tried to have a conversation with someone on the other side of the political divide, or COVID war divide, or vaccination divide, or culture war divide? And you pretty well think, I've got a pretty clear and logically informed approach. But it doesn't take you long to figure out that your best thinking and their best thinking has taken you to very different places. And applying each of your versions of your best thinking isn't really going to lead you to any great meetings of the mind. Here's another example. You ever tried to resurrect or reconcile a relationship that's gone sideways? You think, well, we just need to talk this out, apply logic, come to an agreement. But oftentimes it seems that logic and rational thinking come up short when we're seeking to resolve things like relational divides. Those are just a couple examples of how clear thinking and attempting to apply it isn't nearly as simple as it sounds. Sometimes we don't even need other people to realize that our own thoughts only take us so far. For example, I talked to a guy recently who said he had been having an existential crisis around the issue of his faith in God. Now, no matter how many different ways he approached the topic, and here's the quote, he said he just couldn't get his head around what the right answer was. It's interesting that his mother, who didn't actually subscribe to his religious views, said to him that perhaps his quest or his search needed to be dealt with in a different fashion rather than just a logical one. Interesting. Now, this is not a podcast about faith or lack of faith, And I'm not saying that there are not logical, rational considerations to factor into one's faith journey. But what I'm saying is this. For this person, the answer to his desire for faith answers wasn't something that he could think his way into or think his way out of. Now, this is a podcast about recovery. And as I thought about his comments, I thought that his conclusions about the limitations of his thought processes can definitely apply to the struggles we have around porn and the approach we take to our recovery. About 10 years ago, for a number of months, I went to a Thursday noon hour AA meeting. And I did it because I wanted to learn more about recovery and more about my own addictive struggles. And at the time, this is going back 10, maybe a little bit more years, it was the closest thing that I could find to a recovery group. Now, one of the phrases that I heard at AA was this: it's your own best thinking which has got you into this predicament. Or they had a cuter phrase, which was, don't go into your head without adult supervision. Now, what were they trying to say? So I looked up the meaning behind those sayings, and I found it quite instructive, even a bit humorous. So this is what I read from an AA source, quoting this website I was on. Quote, some say that recovery becomes more difficult when we possess a high IQ level. We like to intellectualize our addiction, and we feel that our intellect holds the key to solving our problems. But AA is a spiritual program, not an academic one. Many of us drink and abuse drugs in an attempt to overcome feelings. We do this because our intellect tells us it's a good idea. In other words, our best thinking didn't get us sober. If anything, it just made things worse. So it seems like AA slogans, it seems, for example, these slogans reek of simplicity. If it seems they do, they should. We need a bit of simplicity in our lives. And it finishes up by saying this: because if we continue to try and rationalize everything, we just may wind up in the middle of a relapse. And that won't do a whole lot to strengthen the intellect in which we place so much pride. So I thought about that. I kind of botched when I was reading it, but I thought about that and I tried to apply that to my own porn recovery. And this is some of the parallels that I heard in what they said. Number one, we like to think that we can overcome our struggles with our smarts. Well, if that's the case, then only dumb people would struggle with an addiction, right? And we know that's not true. It reminds me of a guy I used to know who liked to remind everybody how high he had scored on the IQ test, or the Mensa test, I think it was. And I looked at his life, which was a mess, and it was pretty clear to me that book smarts didn't lead to life smarts. Here's another thing that I've learned as I apply this thing. We tend to mistake knowledge with mastery. We think that if we can learn enough, we will somehow become a master of our domain, to use an old Seinfeld quote. And this reliance on our intellect also fails to factor in the reality that we are all capable of incredible self-deception. Let me say that again. The reliance on our intellect fails to factor in the reality that we are all capable of incredible self-deception. So thinking like, I'm getting better, it's not that bad, that was the last time, and so on and so on. By the way, that's one of the reasons that groups sometimes hold up a much better mirror as we say something than our own thinking does. We never have really good feedback to our own thinking, and being in a group sometimes holds up a great mirror to our thinking. Here's another one I've seen. Guys often go on this endless research project, going down all the brain chemistry rabbit hole, going down all the different, trying to understand all the things that are happening. They're trying to unlock or discover the one thing, the hidden key, I'll call it, that somehow makes their recovery simple or easy or downhill. AA does say keep it simple, but that's not saying the same thing as we need to figure it out first. I found that most of guys who attempt to think themselves out of an addictive struggle, they simply postpone getting started. Let me say that again. When we attempt to think ourselves out of an addictive struggle, most of the time it leads us to postpone the simple act of getting started and taking the very first steps that are right in front of us. That old saying, the journey of 1,000 miles, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins what? With the very first step. So many guys are going, no, I have to figure it out first. No, take your first step. You want to throw your rational thinking into a tizzy? Then ask yourself this question. Why do I continue to act out when I know that it is not a good thing for me? Think your way out of that quandary. You'll be going for the next 25 years because you won't be able to think your way out of that. Again, I'm all for right thinking. In fact, in the course that I teach, Finding Traction, we spend quite a bit of time on an understanding of our behaviors and getting an understanding about what's going on, the cycles we find ourselves in. But that's not the same as saying we have to figure it all out first. Let me also say this. Sometimes it's not just logical, rational reasons at play. Many of our behaviors don't just flow out of bad thinking. Counseling, for example, takes lots of different approaches. And sure, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps people come to healthier thinking. And that is a worthy and helpful goal, and I'm all for it. But I think any counselor worth their salt will also tell you there's other reasons why people act the way they do, and it's not just bad thinking. Some people respond out of trauma. Some respond out of habit. Some act out of unmet needs. Some act out of having a core emotional trigger going on in their lives that defies logical explanations. For example, EMDR works to help understand where is your body storing emotional trauma. And it seeks to intervene in what are those almost automatic responses when we get in certain circumstances. Again, there is certain emotional triggers, responses that can go beyond simply better thinking. So, there is one reason above all that I think our own best thinking is a dead end. It's this. This is the reason above all. Most guys that are trying to think their way out of their porn struggles are doing it to keep from having to involve others or walking with others in their recovery. They stay stuck in their pride. They stay stuck in their self-deception. And they don't have to tell anybody. Think about it this way. If I have the belief that I can figure things out on my own or get my head around my behaviors, then I won't have to take the humiliating or risky step of asking for help. Once again, it comes down to that pesky pride and humility thing. Asking for help or considering connecting with a group of guys, similar struggling guys, threatens my pride and shatters the illusion that I am the master of my own destiny in my own ship, that I both captain and crew by, yes, you got it, myself. I think that's why most of the guys who reach out to me say in one version of their story something like this: I have tried every possible route to recovery on my own, and it hasn't led me to the outcome that I want for my life. We're like the guys who get lost in the forest, who try to find their way out, and we keep returning to the same place and going, hey, this place looks familiar. I've been here before. I'm going around in circles. And of course, in this scenario, we would say, I'm thinking myself around and around in circles. So let me end with this. If you've tried your own best thinking and it continues to lead you to an unsatisfactory conclusion, let me encourage you to reach out. I'd love to hear from you at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Till next time, this is Vern signing out. God bless.